Hey everybody, it's Dr. Eric Balcavage. We're back for another edition of the Thyroid Answers podcast. And today we've got another guest, and it's Risa Groux. She is a functional certified nutritionist. I think I said that right? And so she came out with a book called FOODFRAME. Diet is a 4-letter word. And we're going to talk to her about the book. We're going to talk about different types of diets, the pluses, the minuses of these things, maybe a little bit about food religion and diet religions, and maybe why that's not necessarily such a great idea. And we'll get a little bit into her ideas and concepts in the book and just kind of see where it goes from there. So Risa, welcome to the Thyroid Answers podcast. Thanks for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's great to have you on the podcast, and we are going to kind of get into this kind of nutrition and dietary stuff. But I think before we get into a little in-depth talk, let's talk about you. So let the listeners know who you are, why they should go out and buy the book. We'll talk about that more later. But who is it? Who are you, and why are you doing in this space? Because there's a little difference between maybe what's traditionally learned by dietitians and nutritionists, and maybe from a functional perspective.
Yes. So I am a functional nutritionist, as you mentioned. I'm also a certified autoimmune coach. So I deal with a lot of autoimmunity. And I myself have Hashimoto's, although I'm about 10 points away from reversing it. So I've had my journey, and I was perfectly healthy. I grew up in a home where we ate pretty much real food. Junk food was a very rare occasion, and everybody in my house was on a diet. These foods are fattening. I'm dieting. I'm not dieting. I was super confused as a kid. Like, what's the difference between all these foods? And nobody was particularly heavy, but we're always on a diet, right? So I was very confused about that. So I started my passion for nutrition very early on, and I ended up pursuing business and sports marketing, and worked for a couple of professional teams, and just read every nutrition book I could possibly get my hands on in between, and when I ever had free time. And then next thing you know, I got married and conceived a child right away. And right after that, we were trying for our second child, and we just couldn't get pregnant. I don't know what happened. I couldn't conceive. And so I started to go down this rabbit hole of why am I not being able to conceive a baby? And I ended up at a fertility specialist who checked my blood and said, "Oh, you have a hypothyroid," right? My thyroid was an underachiever. I thought, why is this? And he gave me a pill. And when I said to him, why? He goes, "It doesn't matter. Just take this pill." I said, "Well, for how long?" And he said, "Every day." I said, no. For how long do I take this pill? He said, "Oh, for the rest of your life." And I thought, why would I take something synthetic that my body was actually made to produce? Shouldn't we be looking at why it's not producing? So I went down that rabbit hole for a while and ended up not getting pregnant through those modalities. And I ended up doing acupuncture, and it was a good thing for me, and changed my diet. And I really did a deep dive onto everything. I started to create a list of why this could be happening. And I got pregnant, no problem, had a great pregnancy. And then a few years later, I went to a naturopath and did all this blood work and found out I had Hashimoto's. So I was in the Hashimoto's club, and then I was like full steam. We got to figure out what this is. Why is this happening? So I couldn't find a checklist anywhere that I looked. And so I created my own. Why would I get autoimmunity? And I created this checklist, which is in my book, FOODFRAME. And it turned out I had pretty much everything on the checklist. Once I realized, I started knocking those things down, and I started to improve my health, and I got to the root causes. At the same time, I was going to nutrition school, and then I started my practice and started working with people, and really sort of figured it all out. At least I think so. You know, how to help a thyroid, and what the root causes are, and so on and so forth. We have done some reversing of Hashimoto's in my office, which is great. It's a goal of mine to help people reverse those autoimmune diseases if possible.
So as you go to school, right, and you're going to were you going to a kind of a traditional allopathic nutrition type model, or did you initially go into more of a functionally based model of nutrition?
I went into the Institute of Natural Healing and became a certified clinical nutritionist. And then I did further education with functional nutrition. So I look at everything in functional medicine guidelines, and I'm really about prevention. I look at the body as a whole, and I just want to know the why. Why is it that we're having chronic rashes? Why is it that we're having chronic headaches or stomach issues? Or, why is it? It's not because we have a deficiency in medication. We know that.
Well, in functional medicine, we look along those lines. I mean, I just had that conversation. I had just had a conversation maybe an hour or so ago with somebody who called and said, hey, my TSH is going up. I need to know what to do about it. I'm like, okay, well, what do you think? Why do you think this is occurring? She's, I don't know. And so I said, have you done functional medicine? Do you know what that is? Or you more just have a history of allopathic treatment? And she's like, I don't even know what the difference between those two things is. And so I said, there's your problem. So you're looking for how to fix your TSH. And we don't even know if your TSH all by itself being slightly elevated at 3.5 is a problem, because you're looking at one value with no context. And so I explained to her kind of the functional medicine model, and she was like, I never even heard about all that stuff. I just wanted to know what do I need a stronger dose? What do I need to do? I'm like, so that's an allopathic model, which is you're just trying to manage a number or manage a symptom. Your doc's managing the number. You want to manage the symptoms because you think your symptoms are tied to the TSH. But functional medicine is totally different. And functional medicine is about getting to the root cause of why. And she's like, well, that's what I want. I'm like, well, that is not an allopathic based real like principle primarily. That is really a functional medicine type principle, or at least it should be. And I think it started out that way. Unfortunately, today, I see this increased movement to what I call greenwashing of medicine, which is people come from more of an allopathic background and they're intrigued by this functional medicine idea that we can do things through diet, nutrition, and some strategic supplemental strategies, but they're just replacing medications with supplements instead of still going to the root cause. And I'm sure we'll get into this in greater detail. Like, what are your thoughts and feelings about this? And we talked about that, how you kind of talk about it in the book. But for those who are listening, truly my opinion, and I'll get your opinion in a second, what functional medicine is about is not just replacing a medication with a supplement, right? It's not about saying, oh, Synthroid is synthetic, so I need to take a glandular. The question should be, as you were thinking early on, is if I have hypothyroidism, why did that occur, right? And, for 90% of the population, it's an immune-driven disorder, whether your antibodies are positive or not. You have thyroiditis, you have Hashimoto's, you have thyroiditis. So whether they're antibodies positive, not positive, that's probably what you got. But if you ask your allopathic physician, why do I have it? If you really push them, they'll probably tell you, listen, most of the cases are autoimmune. We don't know what causes autoimmune condition. We don't look for what's causing autoimmune condition. So we just treat the disease and management. And that's not, it's not like wrong. That's their model, right? But that's not a functional medicine model. So when you come to functional medicine, in my opinion, it shouldn't be, okay, I'm going to replace my Synthroid with a glandular, I'm going to get rid of, or I'm going to add T3 to T4 because that's more of a functional model. Neither one of those truly is a functional model. The functional model is what's driving my immune system to become upregulated, what's driving this immune damage to the thyroid gland, and how do I address that, which is essentially what you're doing in your practice, which is what you're talking about with nutrition. So give me your take on what you think functional medicine is, especially from a thyroid perspective versus maybe what you experienced in allopathic medicine.
So I think there's 4 pillars of functional medicine or functional nutrition that I live by. Mm-hmm. One is we look at prevention, right? Let's try to prevent or prevent disease. We know that in the traditional, conventional allopathic paradigm that they can't treat disease until you're already there. right? So they just wait until you get there. We don't do that in functional nutrition or functional medicine. That's not what I do in my office. And we look at prevention. So our reference ranges on labs tend to be a little bit more narrower than allopathic conventional medicine. So that's the first thing. The second thing we look at is we look at root causes. We're looking at the why. Why is it that my immune system is upregulated? Why is it that I have chronic fatigue or chronic gastrointestinal symptoms? Why is it? It's not because we have this deficiency in medication, right? We don't have a deficiency. We weren't born with a deficiency in Tylenol. That's not why we have body aches, right? We got to get to the root cause of it. The third thing that we look at is we look at the body as a whole interconnective unit. So everything is interdependent on everything else. It's not just this appendage and this specialist that treats this gland or this organ or this appendage. It is a whole interconnected unit. And the fourth pillar that we live by is, at least I do, is data. You know, I'm not really good at playing darts with the lights off and I cannot see the target. I suck at it. I get impatient. Everybody gets impatient. We get frustrated. So I want to know exactly where I'm going. So I need the data. So I do comprehensive blood tests. I do comprehensive stool tests. And I find out what is the driver here. I'm finding out what your health status is. And then that way we can eat according to your health status and treat that health status so that we can change that to be a different health status. So those are the four main pillars.
Yeah, I would agree with all of those. And I think the challenge sometimes there is some challenges from a functional perspective in the fact that some people like the idea of using supplements, but don't kind of abide by all those pillars, right? They're not necessarily looking for the root cause, because the root cause often isn't just a selenium deficiency. So you need my selenium thyroid fixing supplement. That's usually not the case, and the literature kind of backs that up, that selenium usually does not the thing that's going to fix it when you have an underconversion issue. Really, at the end of the day, we have to get to root cause. And oftentimes, at least from my opinion, it's why I have a book coming out on this, I don't think the immune-driven damage to the thyroid gland is an immune system that has totally lost control. From my opinion, I look at what's going on in the physiology as an adaptive change to some type of excessive stress response. Because to me, that puts the system in more control versus, hey, my immune system lost control. It doesn't know what my thyroid gland anymore is, and it's just going to destroy it. Well, then you're doomed. I mean, then you're not talking about trying to recover from Hashimoto's. You're not trying to reduce your thyroiditis, because if it is an immune system that's just lost control, then how is it going to, if it's lost control, how does it miraculously regain control? If it's an adaptive response to something that says, hey, normally thyroid hormones used to drive increased metabolism, to make more proteins and enzymes, then reducing thyroid physiology is a way to kind of reduce these products that maybe a threat could use as a fuel source and shift the attention towards cell defense, ramp up an immune and inflammatory process. But by having an overall downregulation of metabolism, we control the amount of oxidative stress so we don't create excessive amounts of damage. So I think that's a better place and a better kind of place to come from when we think about what's going on versus, oh, my body's attacking me, oh, my immune system's attacking me. I think that's a bad place to be. It's not good for people to think that their immune system has just lost control and is attacking them. It creates a lot of depression. And I think it takes control away from the individual person versus saying, hey, I probably have some reaction to foods. All I got to do is remove those reactions to let my immune system calm down, remove the foods, let the immune system calm down, and then I can start to regain control. I've got some type of infection. I didn't know I did. Now I need to do some things to address the infection and what allowed it to occur. And if I do that, then my immune system can calm down and physiology comes back into kind of more of a normal homeostatic state.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So, I always look at foundational issues, which are systemic inflammation and gut health. So if there's a pathogen, an infection, a virus, something's in the gut that's driving this, a lot of parasites will drive. Blastocystis will be a root cause for Hashimoto's, but there's so many things that if we don't look at the gut, how do we know, right? So we quell the systemic inflammation, addressing those things that you mentioned, and then we heal the gut. because leaky gut and compromised gut is a huge contributor.
Yeah, I totally agree. Trauma, emotional stress, toxins, food intolerances, organisms. I mean, these are big things. And we've got hypoxia because of disrupted breathing and we got disrupted sleeping patterns. So there's a number of things that can drive that excessive stress response. It's usually not one thing. It's usually accumulation of things over time. Sometimes it's an acute thing and we know, okay, this happened, going through a divorce. And after that, I had a problem. I had my second child and all of a sudden this kicked in. Yeah. So there's maybe one major acute thing that triggered the kind of immune upregulation. But for most of the time, it's just an accumulation. At some point, we push into above the threshold where now the immune system's like, okay, no more. We're shutting everything down and we're going into defense mode. And that's where we see this kind of sustained kind of allostatic regulation of thyroid physiology, allostatic regulation of cortisol regulation, gut physiology. And unless we get out of that, reduce that excessive stress response, there's no way you're going to get healthy for an extended period of time. It becomes almost impossible. So one of the big things that we typically do when somebody comes into functional medicine, much less so in allopathic medicine, is we start talking to people about their diet. And the gut, as you said, plays a huge role in chronic immune and inflammatory issues. So maybe the place to start is, from your perspective, why does it seem like foundationally, almost all of us in functional medicine, when somebody's got an immune, inflammatory, thyroid issue, skin issue, detoxification issue, why does all the attention go to the GI tract?
Because that's really the root of a lot of that. So, we have leaky gut, we've got leaky brain. We've got leaky gut. We've got it's not happy. So it tries to, whether it's trying to detoxify with rashes or acne or something, the liver's not happy, but the gut is it's the foundation for everything. I mean, we have trillions of bacteria there, right? We have a balance. We need a balance of both good and bad, right? So we have to make the gut happy. So when we only have one layer of epithelial cells on the intestinal lining, right? So we have 7 on the outside. So when we are constantly attacking it, and whether it's, as you mentioned, stress, or it's food particles, or, undigested proteins, or it's toxins, a constant barrage of toxins, and all these organ malfunctions, all these things, they poke little holes, right? They're called tight junctions. And all these things go in through the bloodstream, and the body says, who are you? You're the enemy. You start to create antibodies, right? So we do this long enough. I mean, we get food sensitivities, and then we get inflammation, right? The driver of disease. And we do this long enough, and it's a great model to create autoimmune disease. So it all comes down to inflammation and gut health. So if the gut is good, then we have a greater chance of not being in an inflamed state. And so it's just critical to find out what's going on in the gut. Do we have H. pylori, which most people don't know? And do we have anything else? Do we have bugs, parasites, fungus, candida? How do we do with fat malabsorption? How do we do with pancreatic enzyme production? How's our inflammation? What's our secretory IgA, our immunity, right? So we're playing in the dark, really, if we don't know. So that's why I always do a very comprehensive stool test. And once we know, then we know what the state of the gut is, and then we can modify it if needed and address those issues. I mean, I had a client yesterday that I worked with about a year or so ago, and she came in and I said, you've got H. pylori. It's not flagged, but it's no virulence factors, but you've got H. pylori. You got to address this. She had a couple of other things going on, but she's like, I'm good. So she came in to see me about a month ago, and she said, I am not good. So she hadn't changed any lifestyle, no diet changes. And we did a stool test again, and it came back. And yesterday I went through it with her, and she's got flagged H. pylori. She's got virulence factors, which we know can lead to gastric cancers and peptic ulcers. And then she had tremendous amount of blood in her stool, microscopic blood. So it was an urgent situation. I said, you got to get a colonoscopy stat. So she's worried, of course, now. But I'm sure she wants to reverse the clock in which she addressed it a year ago. So if you don't look and then you look and you don't take action, you know, you get what you get when you do what you do. But gut health is imperative for everything.
Yeah. And for the listeners, you know, to condense all that good information down really simply, everything goes in through the GI tract and almost everything comes out through the GI tract. So you've got to put food in that has to be broken down, digested, and then assimilated. And that food feeds organisms that then make either toxins or micronutrients for us, right? Everybody's trying to get the magic vitamin and supplement, but many of the bacteria, if we grow the right bacteria, that bacteria helps maintain the tight junctions. The bacteria helps with our biophysiology. The bacteria helps us digest our food. The bacteria helps us produce vitamins and nutrients that we actually need. Or if we grow the wrong stuff, right, or we grow higher levels of things that maybe not so good to have in there, they can produce a bunch of toxic chemicals that come in. They can impact the absorption of nutrients. They can cause us to not be able to detox things appropriately and lead to other issues. And of course, as you said, there's not a big barrier between the outside of the body. And I'm going to say the outside of the body because for the listener, from your mouth to your anus is a tube, and technically it's inside us, but it's really still outside the body proper. And so we dump stuff down this tube, and hopefully everything gets managed and processed correctly, but that's not necessarily always the case, right? So right. And so there's only one little cell kind of holding everything back. But that's also the reason probably that 70-ish% of the immune system surrounds your GI tract, because we need a big police force kind of around that kind of weak barrier, because, hey, anything could break through at any time, and we got to be able to control that. So there's a big part of your immune system that surrounds that GI tract, and there's integral connections between your gut and your thyroid. There's direct lymph tracts from your gut to your thyroid. There's direct connections between your gut and your brain. Brain one, brain two. We can argue about which one's one and which one's two, but there's a connection between everything. So it is so important to look at the GI tract, because I had somebody ask me, like, everybody I talk to wants to talk about my gut. I don't have any GI symptoms. I'm like, look, you may not have GI specific symptoms, or you might have them and not realize that those are not normal feelings, but you could do a lot of the right things. I just did my vibrant stool test, right? And I don't really have any symptoms, but hey, I got problems when it came back. So I just got done my 3 days of elemental cleanse. And now I'll do some things to support what was there. But I'm doing a lot of the right things. So if I'm doing a lot of the right things and I've got issues, how easy is it for somebody who lives on the standard American diet, right, to really have issues and not be aware of it? I think that's the biggest thing. And maybe you can talk about that a little bit. Is people would say, well, how is it possible that I could have problems in my gut that are causing my skin issues or my migraines or these things when I don't have symptoms? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Oh gosh, I could talk about this all day, but this might be too much information for you and your listeners, but every year, typically I do a colonic cleanse. So I do not eat food for 7 days, and I drink nutrients, I take supplements, and I drink things that help create to unglue the remnants in my intestinal lining. And so I go in for a colonic every single day, and I eat super clean, like super, super clean, and as organic as possible. And I mean, I go out and I travel, so I get toxins regardless, but so I do that to clean. But every time I do this detox, I've done it multiple times, like day 7, I'm like, there's no way there's anything left. And what you're getting in this is this tarry black. I mean, you could see it. It's in the shape of your intestinal lining. And that gunk, that dark tarry stuff, is preventing absorption from your intestinal lining. So you may be eating great, but the question is, are you absorbing? People always used to say you are what you eat. I always say you are what you absorb. Like how do you know you're absorbing this food? You know, if you've got chronic diarrhea, you've got malnutrition, right? We're not absorbing that food. You know, if we don't have an acidic environment, are we breaking down our food and absorbing it? So the gut has so much to do with everything. I'll give you another example. I worked with a woman last year who her allergist sent her to me. The allergist didn't know what to do with her because she was allergic to everything and she didn't know how to treat her. And the woman just couldn't eat anything. Young girl, early 30s. And she came to see me and I did this stool test on her. And, you know, we test for zonulin, which is an enzyme that we typically see when there's leaky gut. And the lab wants you less than 107. And most people are around that. And if they're high, they're, you know, maybe 200 or I've seen 350. She was 1,050. She was just had these gaping holes in her intestinal line. I'm like, you can't eat anything because everything is reactive, right? You're having this inflammatory response to every single food and supplement you're taking. So she was very diligent. We worked together for about 10 months and we healed her gut. It took a while. We had to go very slowly. She had reactions to pretty much everything, but we got basically almost to the finish line. She was so happy she could eat like 30 foods. She didn't feel sick anymore. And she was like, I'm good. I think she had a little bit more to go, but she'll be back. But you can reverse this. But when we have food intolerances, I'm looking at the gut. When we have those skin issues, I'm looking at the gut. The acne, it's so common with kids. I get teenagers who come in with this chronic acne, and you know it's not because they have a deficiency in Accutane. That's not why this is happening. And if you don't get to the root of it, then how are you ever going to fix it when it reoccurs? Or do you just go on the birth control pill and just say, forget it, I'll kick the can for another 25 years, which helps to decrease your good gut bacteria. So you're just kicking the can and making it worse.
And I think we've done that for decades, right? And so everybody, I think the problem is that you have this. And I used to be very angry at allopathic medicine because I came from that model, but I'm now, you know, it's just what allopathic does is they manage disease and diagnose diseases and manage them, but not ever, I wouldn't say not ever, but the focus is not on root cause issues or how do I optimize somebody's health. It's about how do I manage the disorder of disease, which works great in a acute care, crisis management, or for the person who doesn't want to put any work or effort into their health and well-being. That it's great to keep them alive for an extended period of time, but that's not health, right? That's disease management. And so it's just a different model. So bless you.
Thank you.
So let's talk about one of the things that often creates, I think, a little bit of confusion and chaos in functional medicine, and where I think we do ourselves a misjustice is about diets. There are so many food religions, and I think what we've done is circled the wagons and shot in, right? Instead of all, you know, the paleo people getting together with the keto people, getting together with the vegans and the vegetarians and the you know, what carnivore people, and saying, hey, look, the overall focus should be on a low processed diet, whole food, low processed diet, and meat can be good. Organs can be good, vegetables can be good, any plants can be good, right? So all of these natural foods, if we eat these things in a foods as close to the way they came out of the ground, out of the water, off the tree, or you know, walk the earth, right? We're probably going to be in a better state. And if we turned our attention away from each other and then towards an industry that is just crushing us with highly processed, I'm going to say tasty. A lot of it isn't tasty, but kind of addicting type foods. That's where we'd have the most benefit. Instead, we kind of shoot each other. And so I'll let you talk about that. What's your thought on the food wars? And then I really want to get into talking about some of these diets and what's the best place for somebody who's struggling, have health issues, before maybe they meet you, before they come to see me. Where should they start? And we've got a number of different diets, so we'll talk about each one and maybe the pros and cons. So what's your thought process on these kind of food war, religion wars, or are you okay with everybody fighting with each other about which one of these is better?
I'm all for peace all the time. So that's number one. Number two is there's a lot of staunch supporters of these diet religions, as you mentioned, and they're very sort of elitist in their view because it works for them. And that is awesome. But we're all genetically different. We're all completely genetically different. And in addition to being genetically different, we all have different health statuses. So if somebody writes a book and says, this is what you eat, you take out these and you eat these and you will thrive, a lot of people will. A lot of those people will, but not all of them. We all have that story where that neighbor or that colleague or that cousin lost 45 pounds on keto, but you tried it and it didn't work at all. Well, yeah, because you might not have a gallbladder, you might have high steatocrit, so you have fat malabsorption issues. Maybe your bile is sticky and sludgy and gooey, and you that would not work for you. That would not be something I would recommend for you. I really feel that we are at the age now in 2022 that we should be customizing our eating program. Netflix tells us what movies we like, and Spotify tells us what music we like. We should be eating the food that is right for our genetics, right?
Are you saying patient-centered?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh. So let me tell you this, and I'll get right back to it. I read a paper this morning on the use of reverse T3 in a clinical setting. And so what the authors had in there, a quote from another paper, that functional medicine is this controversial patient-centered model being used instead of the more scientific disease-centered model. Wow. And I read that and I was like, and this is why we have problems, right? Because it's just exactly what you just said. Even the whole idea, the whole concept of carnivores the way it needs to be is allopathic thinking. Like that's going to work for everybody, but there's no other thing that we don't think about the root issues or the root causes about, right? And say, nope, it's got to work for everything. Like if the power went out in your house, right? Would you just say, okay, it has to be this? No, you would go check the fuse box. Okay, that's not it. Is there a bare wire somewhere that did it? No, that's not it. Maybe somebody hit a pole outside. Like you would run through all those scenarios, but
we can help find it. Why is this? Is it erosion of the pipe, or is it something hit it, or
Right, but why, when it comes to healthcare, do we say nope? This is the way it is for everybody. I don't get it.
I don't get it either. It's a bad paradigm, and it's very nationwide. I mean, I work with a lot of physicians. They're my favorite people to work with. But, I always ask them, would you like me to go through your blood work just like I do with everybody else? Or would you like to take a look at it? Not one time have I ever had anybody say to me that, I'll take a look at it. They don't know. And it's not their fault. It's just the educational system that we have. They don't believe that food has anything to do with health. So, I hear it, you hear it. I mean, we could do a whole Instagram of quotes that doctors say, allopathic doctors say to their patients, that it's just mind-boggling. I'm like, they actually said that? Like they heard themselves say that? Mm-hmm. But it's true. So I always encourage people to think for themselves. If you think something's wrong, something's wrong. Yeah. So find it. So what I think is that, we look at these root causes and you have to address them, right? You got to look at the data. And so I don't believe that everybody should eat exactly the same. Now, do I think that there's a common thread amongst all the diet types that I recommend for my patients? Absolutely. We're eating real food, right? We're eating real food. So I always say to everybody who walks in my office for the very first time is, I want you to imagine that your body is just like a sneaker factory. You've got all the equipment to make a sneaker. So if I give you leather, rubber, or canvas, we're going to get a sneaker at the end, right? It may change in shape or size or color, but it's going to be a sneaker. That's the equipment you have. But if I say to you, what if we put some cell phone parts in your sneaker factory? What would you say, right? It would just completely ruin the equipment, right? If we went to the Nike factory and want to make a cell phone, they'd send us to the loony bin, right? Mm-hmm. We'd have to take those cell phone parts and put them in a cell phone factory. So I use that silly little example because whoever it was who created us, whenever that was, we had these things crawling on the ground and sprouting from the earth that we could eat, sustain ourselves, and procreate. Our two main goals as living organisms. And then years later, the Industrial Revolution came, and all of a sudden we were inundated with chemicals. Today, our FDA has approved, this is a new number, 86,000 chemicals for us to use, well over 3,000 we can eat. And most of them, unfortunately, aren't even tested. They're handshake deals. They're, you know what it goes, you know what it.
Or we test them individually,
Right.
and not as cumulative, which is one of those things that becomes problematic. Like, hey, this chemical is safe in your water. Okay. But there's like 40 of those chemicals. Isn't there, is it possible there's a dose effect with the cumulative dose effect? Is there possibly a synergistic effect that these things have when they're all combined? We don't test that. But don't we think that might be a good idea?
Right.
No. So
we're putting cell phone parts in our factory every single day. Every time we breathe, every time we eat, you know, especially if you're not eating well, if you're eating dead food, factory food. And I just encourage every human being to read a label. First of all, we shouldn't be eating foods with labels, but if we do, read the label. I mean, be conscious of what you're putting in your body. We're more concerned about what we're putting on the outside of our body and how our nails look and how our hair looks instead of what's going inside. That's your investment. Yeah. You know, when people say to me, oh, it's too expensive. And I'm like, well, you're going to pay for it later in medications and doctor's offices. So, you know, it depends where your values are. For me, I want to eat real food.
But you and I both know, and some of the people listening to the podcast already know that, man, when I eat good quality food and I actually digest good quality food, I don't require as much consumption. Absolutely. We eat cheap, inexpensive food. Many times we require more of it. And so, yes, the bag of, what are those things? Cheese curls are cheap, right? But I can eat a whole bag of those, right? Because they are designed that as soon as you put them in the mouth, they dissolve into nothing. And somehow you could eat a $2, I don't even know how much they cost, $2 or $3 bag. And you go, that's cheap. That apple, one apple costs me $1. I can get like a whole bag of these Cheetos for, $2. Why wouldn't I get the whole bag of Cheetos? Well, because there's no nutritional value. There's definitely toxic chemicals in there. And it's not going to do anything to really satiate you. What it's really going to do is cause you to want to consume more. So at the end of the day, it's more expensive to eat that way. Because you have to buy more stuff. And two, it's more expensive because the outcome of eating like that for an extended period of time that bill is gonna come due at some point, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. Absolutely. It's dead food. I always say it's like putting shampoo in your gas tank. I've never tried it. I don't know if it would register as full, but I would be pretty clear that it would break my car, right? Mm-hmm. It's not made for shampoo. Right. It might look like gas, seem like gas, but it's not going to fuel you.
But it's cheaper than the $5 a gallon.
Yep. $6 a gallon in California. Right. Yeah.
That's correct. It is, right? So yeah, that bottle is cheaper maybe than the gallon of gas, but it's not going to work right. You might get away with it for a little bit, but
you have to repair your car.
Right.
But later.
Right. And we have a tendency to do that. So
yeah. So I don't believe that one diet type fits all. And I believe that we should be eating according to our health status. And that's what I've learned in the decades that I've been doing this, working with people, is that if you have chronic bloating, if you have SIBO, if you have IBS or IBD, I'm going to recommend low FODMAP. Now that's an elimination diet. We're going to be on that for a short period of time, but it's going to eat according to your health status, right? It's going to help heal you. If you've got blood sugar dysregulation, we're going to go to keto or paleo. But again, if you've got, no gallbladder, you've got fat malabsorption issues, then that wouldn't be the suggested route I would recommend. So there's, and I don't believe that vegetarian or vegan is right for everybody. And there's different types of vegetarians. I talk about that in my book, but it's really important to eat according to your health status. So if you don't know what your health status is, get your blood work or take the quiz on my website, but get your blood work or get your stool test and find out what your status is, and then eat according to that. You'll thrive. You'll feel better. You'll heal your body.
And the diet that you need today may be different depending on what phase you are, what's going on with your physiology. So you could go through a phase where, you know what, I like to eat plants, but because of what's going on, I'm not digesting those plants appropriately, and they're creating some gas and some bloating. So they're healthy foods and you may want to eat them, but right now they're not agreeing with you. You've developed some intolerance to them, or you're not breaking them down appropriately, or the bacteria types of bacteria you have are creating problems with those. So I think, and I think you'd agree with me, that the foundation for anybody who's got, whether you're focused on being healthy or you're struggling with a chronic health issue, the foundational thing should be eat more real food and get rid of as much of the processed food as possible. And I think you and I would both maybe agree that not everybody's going to be perfect. And I try and tell my patients, listen, you're not going to be perfect. Nobody's perfect. So get that anxiety away. You're not going to be perfect. But what you want to do is focus, if you can once you get healthy, my goal for my clients is somewhere 80-20 lifestyle. So 80% of the time, eat whole food, healthy whole foods, right? And then 20% of the time, enjoy yourself a little bit, right? To a point where if you know something bugs you, don't do that very often. But if we tell everybody you have to eat perfectly for the rest of your life, they're going to abandon probably that, because they're like, oh, that's no fun. And it can be healthy, right, and it can be fun, but give yourself a little bit of cushion. Everybody wants a piece of, potentially wants a piece of birthday cake every once in a while, and you should be able to do that. But if your fourth meal of the day is birthday cake or, the bowl of ice cream on a consistent basis, guess what? There's going to be a price to pay for that. That bill will come due at some point. But if it's, let's say there's 7 days in a week and you're a person who eats 3 meals a day, it's 21 meals. And if you eat 18 of those, or 17 or 18 of those really healthy, and 3 or 4 of those in a week, or maybe a little bit less healthy, you're probably still going to be okay for the most part. Right. There may be periods of time when you go, oh man, that bugs me. But the problem is in the US, we have a tendency to eat healthy about 15 to 20% of the time. And 80% of the time, it's processed food, processed oils, Burger King, fast food, all kinds of this kind of junk Franken food, chemicals, right? Yeah. And then we wonder why am I not so healthy? So let's talk about diets, okay? Yeah. So we're in agreement. Whole food diet. If somebody doesn't know where to start with the whole food diet. They can go to your website, and there is a quiz, right? So you can go in there. You do quiz. I did the quiz. It says, hey, I should be AIP. I'm pretty much a paleo, lower carb, higher fat person to begin with, but and I think that's a good place for a lot of people to be. But if you're beyond that, then there might be these other dietary strategies that somebody in functional medicine might recommend. So let's talk about them a little bit. So let's talk about the AIP protocol. What does that mean? Who do you think that's a good kind of dietary platform to start with?
Yeah. So the first thing I usually recommend for pretty much everybody is my detox, because I think it's incredibly important to get the toxins out of the system. If you do not clean out the garage, you are not going to be able to park your car there. So every, couple times a year, at least 2 to 4 times a year, you got to clean out that body, the liver, and everything works much more optimally. So for 2 weeks, we detox, we eat real food, we eat more paleo and protein, lots of vegetables, good fats, sweet potato and yams. Then after that, AIP would be absolutely best suited for anybody who's been diagnosed with autoimmune disease, any kind of autoimmune disease, because we know we're in a state of systemic inflammation. We've got a bit of a cytokine storm going on. Our Th17 has been activated. So we've got some inflammation going on. So the first thing we're trying to do is get a fire hose out and, just get that fire out instead of, I was talking to somebody yesterday, I was like, you're kind of like taking a water gun at your fire that's raging in your basement. Like, how's that working for you? So we got to get the fire hose out, and AIP will really do that. So AIP, Autoimmune Protocol, is basically a paleo diet plus some restrictions. So we're taking out all nightshades, because nightshades we know are very high in lectins, anti-nutrients that will go through the system and cause a lot of inflammation. And then we are taking out any kind of all eggs, because eggs tend to be very allergenic for people with leaky gut, because the protein in eggs tends to be very reactive and cause some inflammation. The other thing we're taking out is nuts and seeds. And then you could have a little bit of berries and a little bit of fruit, but basically you're taking out all legumes, all grains. So you're eating animal protein, very clean, good organ meats would be great. And then unlimited vegetables, any way you want them, but deep fried, but except for corn, peas, and string beans. And then little sweet potatoes and yams, and then some good fats, like olives and avocados, things like that. The whole point of the AIP protocol is it's an elimination diet. So I recommend it for 30 to 90 days. I've done it for 90 days. I think it does a body great. It is very restrictive. You can travel, but you just have to be prepared and bring food because it is a bit restrictive. You can go out to restaurants and things like that, but it's a bit restrictive. But it really helps to quell that chronic and systemic inflammation. And from there, I would always recommend, just like you said, to go into a more paleo and do nightshades occasionally, unless you have flare-ups, and I would stay away from those. And get allergy tested to see if you're responding to eggs and nuts and seeds.
So somebody might say, well, you guys talk about eating whole foods. Aren't nuts and seeds whole foods? And aren't tomatoes whole foods? And aren't nightshade, these nightshade things, aren't they whole foods? So why can't I eat those you're talking about a whole food diet? What would you say to that?
The reason that they're problematic is twofold. People who have autoimmune tend to have a high likelihood of leaky gut. So those are the proteins that are going through the intestinal lining. That's number one. Number two, those foods that we're talking about, grains and legumes and nightshades particularly, have very high levels of lectins, right? So we're all, as human beings or any living organisms, we have two goals. One is to survive and the other is to procreate. So just like plants, humans, when we're in danger, we have the ability to kick, scream, yell, call 911, flee a situation. Plants don't have that ability. So they have this, what I call a hard candy shell around their germ or seed that protects them so that they can eventually repopulate and survive, right? So those foods are very hard to digest, particularly if you don't have an acidic environment. You can't break them down. So those are going to cause bloating and gas and be very difficult to digest and break down. And when you do break them down, if you can, they're going to cause a lot of inflammation due to their anti-nutrient or their lectin content.
Yeah. So for the person listening, if you didn't have a lot of immune inflammatory processes going on, it's probably not a big deal. And it actually could be maybe a little bit beneficial. And I say that because a little bit of irritation, there's a hormetic response, like a little bit of lectin, a little bit of phytic acids, and things that are irritants. That's what we talk about. It's why sometimes the carnivore people say, hey, these plants stimulate the immune system, and so they're not good. Well, the reaction is we always need a little bit of a stimulation to our immune system. We don't want too much, we don't want too little, but we need to have some stimulation. Right. It's like we blame inflammation as being the real issue, and no, inflammation is good. If I go left and I break my muscle tissue down, I need inflammation to actually help stimulate growth and repair. That's what it kind of brings my stem cells to my muscle to repair. So if I suppress all the inflammation, that's not good either. So we need a little bit of stress to the system, a little bit of challenge. So eating plants, I think sometimes we'll hear that from the carnivore community, that all plants are toxic, they create problems. If you already have a healthy immune system and a healthy gut system, there's a ton of benefit from plants, and some of those plant materials can trigger immune activating responses that can make the immune system stronger and stronger over time. The issue is when we already have this cascade of inflammatory mechanisms going on, to add more things in there that could accentuate that inflammation, maybe not the right strategy. So we want to be a little bit more cautious. And most of us, when somebody's coming in with multiple autoimmune issues, insulin resistance, excess belly fat, food reactivity, bad skin, we're just trying to do what we can to reduce the burden on that GI tract and just give it a pause to calm down.
Exactly.
And for some people, I think it's beneficial to almost do like a hard reset. You're talking about detox. There is something called an elemental diet, which is almost like a fast with a bunch of nutrition. So you could say, hey, listen, I'm going to give this really I don't want to say processed, but digested food, pre-digested nutrients, right? So I don't have to digest it. I'm putting nutrition in. I don't have much work to do. I don't need to do, there's not a lot of digestion needs to be done. I just need to sip this stuff slowly through the day. I'm getting nutrition, I'm getting some calories into the system, I'm getting vitamins into the system, but I'm giving my gut a break just to calm the whole thing down. And for some people, that's a real benefit especially if they find out, listen, I'm reactive to every food on that food and sensitivity or intolerance list. All right, you're not. You probably have polyreactivity. We're going to just chill this whole thing out for a couple of days, try and do a hard reset here, and then come in and start trying to help heal, and we can start bringing some foods back. Yeah. So we talk about paleo is a good strategy, and AIP. Sometimes people hear autoimmune paleo or autoimmune protocol or anti-inflammatory protocol. Essentially, those things are all about the same thing. There's some other diets that people kind of have a tendency towards going to as they're in this kind of model. They may not do well on maybe an AIP diet, and then they might want to try, or somebody says, hey, I did ketogenic and I lost a bunch of weight. Talk about the ketogenic diet. Who do you think that's helpful for? Who do you think it's not helpful for? And what should people be aware of if they go to it? What should they expect?
Yeah, so keto is great. It's very enticing, right? And we see a ton of products now in Whole Foods and all these natural markets about keto. And I was just looking at a keto bar yesterday that is just filled with chemicals and just highly inflammatory ingredients. So, just because it says keto doesn't mean it's healthy. Mm-hmm. So, keto is great. It's basically when we switch our fuel source from carbohydrates or sugars that we feed the mitochondria, right? We get into the cell, and if our receptors are open, and we get that in, and then we make ATP. That's our energy source. That's our fuel source. When you're in the state of ketosis, you're switching your fuel source from carbohydrates and sugar to fat. So you have to eat 75% or more of your diet in fat, and a little difficult to do that, but some people can do it. And you get into the state of ketosis. So you're burning fat for fuel. You have ketones in your urine, and you are you're using fat as your fuel source. Very good for some people that it works for, not so great for others. Very hard for me personally. I've tried keto. I can't even get into ketosis. I do the urine stick. So I always recommend doing a urine stick in the morning just to make sure you're in the state of ketosis. I could just never get into ketosis no matter how much fat I ate. So some people can't. It's very not as good for women. Some women will thrive with keto. If you have high levels of stress, you have cortisol issues, I wouldn't recommend it for you. But much better, men do much better at keto than women do. And I also don't recommend being on keto for very long. So I would say do it in 3-month stretches and then take a little bit of a break and then get back on. Just from my observations, because it's great as far as cardiovasculars and things. There's so much science out there, and I've done the blood work myself with people on ketosis, and it seems to be very healthy for people, but I don't think it's a great program long-term. I think it's great in 3-month chunks personally. And I also think that the big challenge for keto is getting enough fiber. So, we talk about the carnivore diet, it's very close to, it's the meat and cheese diet. So, because you have to maintain that fat. You cannot have more than 20 net carbs a day of carbs, because you'll get out of ketosis. Very easy to get out of ketosis, a little harder to get back into it. It takes a couple of days. But so what I recommend is see how you do. If you've had your gallbladder removed, I don't recommend it for you at all. If you've got fat malabsorption, not a good fit for you. So mostly for men and people who can tolerate fats and people who are not under tremendous stress, especially women.
Yeah, I'll add to that too. One of the things that's really important for people is that they assume that, hey, I'll just burn fat. But burning fat optimally is a process called beta oxidation, and that requires a lot of oxygen, and it really is requiring your mitochondria to work efficiently in an oxygen-rich environment. The problem is most of the people that I see have chronic health issues, and most of those people have a tendency to favor reduced mitochondrial function, part of that cell stress, cell danger response. So the mitochondria is actually downregulated in those situations often. It's not that they're shut off, but it's downregulated. And part of the theory for why that occurs is that when you make energy aerobically, there's a lot of exhaust. There's oxidative stress that comes off of that. And if I've got, let's say, an infection, my body's already going to increase oxidative stress to try and deal with the infection, because those free radicals can help me kill that organism. And if I have that part upregulated, and I have this machine, this engine that's producing a whole bunch of oxidative stress, the amount of oxidative stress that free radicals, the amount of oxidative stress produced may be way too much and overwhelm my antioxidant capacity of the cell and cause cell damage and destruction. So some of the theory is that, hey, this whole downregulation of the metabolism, downregulation of the mitochondria is really part of the protective response to say, hey, we're going to slow this part of the free radical production down so that this area that needs to increase it can do it, but we don't create damage. So why do I say that? Because if you're already chronically ill, have chronic inflammation, have low T3 state, are already struggling with hypothyroid signs and symptoms and low energy and fatigue, and you think you're going to shift into fat burning, it may not work out well at all. You may be wiped out, exhausted, still not able to burn fat. And you'll be like, why? I'm only eating this fat. I'm getting fatter. It's not working. Well, because you don't have the mitochondria to actually burn that fuel aerobically. And for those of you who are exercising and doing, hey, I'm doing my cardio, and you're out running and doing cardio, and you're like, hey, I'm coming home and I'm craving carbohydrates on this diet. I can't figure out why I'm so hungry. I'm fighting I got to do all these keto bombs to just help my brain out, right? The reason is you are probably going out there and doing 20, 30, 40, 60 minutes of high intensity cardio, training in an anaerobic level. And when you're in an anaerobic state, you can't burn fats. And so your body is saying, I need glucose. I need glucose. So now you got to upregulate cortisol and epinephrine, and we're running something called a Cori cycle to generate glucose. And you're going to feel lousy because it's a net loss of energy. You're stealing what little kind of energy you can make, and then you're not feeding the glucose that the system is requiring. So you're training yourself to be anaerobic, but you're asking your body to make energy aerobically. That's like driving an electric car, never plugging it in and keep trying to put gas in it. It will not work.
Right.
So
exactly.
you got to be really, really careful, along with the things that you said regarding, hey, can I even absorb the fats, right? Do I have the biophysiology? Do I have pancreatic enzymes to help break down these things? Do I have bile to help to really metabolize things and really pull them into the system? Mm-hmm. Like, do I have the bacteria that can process some of this stuff appropriately without creating issues? So it's not a diet for everybody, but this is why we need to be patient-centered, not disease-centered. So even if somebody says, well, you have SIBO, right? That doesn't necessarily mean the typical SIBO diet is going to work perfectly for you. You still have to look at, hey, when I eat that, even though it says it's okay, it still might not work as well as you want it to, because SIBO is just a name that we slapped on a whole bunch of signs and symptoms. It's not necessarily it could be a little bit different for everybody and how they experience it. Yeah. So anything you want to add to that, or I'm going to go to the next dietary strategy?
Yeah, no, I think you covered it pretty well. I mean, just to reiterate that we should be customized eating, right? But not one size fits all. You just made that point.
So let's talk about vegan and vegetarian, right? So listen, I think I have a cousin that is a big vegetarian or vegan. She's written a bunch of cookbooks. And she lives that lifestyle, and she looks like she's doing fantastic with it as an athlete and doing it. That's great. But I also see some of the sickest people I've seen in my practice are people that went to vegetarianism or veganism because they were chronically ill. They felt better initially, and then they're 5, 6 years, 7 years into it, and they are not healthy at all. They're really overweight, they're bloated, their skin's not good, and they can't get through. They've almost had this emotional block that all animals are bad, only plants are good. And whether it's a philosophical thing, a religious thing at this point, I don't know. But I often tell them, look, this is 6 years or 7 years doing this. There's probably micronutrient deficiencies that you've created. There's imbalances in the bacteria that you've created. It's contributing to this chronic inflammatory state we're seeing. You're probably more of a carbitarian than a vegetarian at this point. So give me your take on the pluses and the pros and the cons of both vegetarianism and veganism.
So it depends what kind of vegetarian and vegan you are. So as you stated, you could eat French fries, Oreo cookies, and drink Coke all day long and be a very compliant vegan. But that's not my definition of vegan, right? So, but there are plenty of people, as you said, those are the people who come into our offices that are usually having fatigue and issues and all skin issues, and I mean so many issues, because they're not eating real food. They're on the carb diet, and they are on the processed food diet. So there's a wide spectrum of those people. There are those people who actually eat plants. Their protein sources are beans, nuts, and seeds and grains. So I caution, I mean, I'm a recovering vegan myself. And when I was a vegan, I was very, in that camp of this is how we do it. And I just kept looking at my blood work and I thought, why are my sugar levels so high? I don't eat sugar. Well, I was just sustaining myself on quinoa and garbanzo beans and lentils, and they're great. They have great protein sources. They're amazing fiber. They've got great phytonutrients. But at the end of the day, they are heavy in carbs, and that's what I was surviving on: carbs and vegetables. And because I don't really have any other choice, there's no other protein source that is without carbs. So, and I wasn't eating the bread and the pastas and all that. I mean, maybe rarely, occasionally, but really. I was clean and wasn't eating cheese or anything. So I personally have witnessed that what the downside is to being even a good vegan. So I also caution people let me back up. There is no question in my mind that everyone should be eating plants. 60 to 80% of your plate every day should be live foods, right? Whether they're cooked or not, they should be coming from a ground or a tree or bush, right? That I don't disagree with for anybody, basically, unless you have some SIBO. It would be maybe a little less. In keto, you can't have that many, but you should have some fiber. There's just no question that we need plants. They're nutrients, they're nutrient-dense foods. There's really not much drawback to them. So I believe in plants. But what the problem I have with vegan and vegetarian is when we talk about the gene mutation MTHFR. MTHFR is a very common gene mutation. I test everybody for it. 90% of the population has it. I have it. Both my kids have it. It's 100% genetic. So it basically means that we don't methylize or process our B12 and or our folate or B9. Now, folate we can get from green leafy greens, but B12, really the only source is animals. So if somebody has let's say they're homozygous, meaning they have two alleles from each parent, then they really need to have a methyl source of B12. So yes, I would give them a supplement in 5 seconds to have that B12 source, but I would also recommend that they should be eating animal protein to have the highest odds of having B12. You can only really find B12 in nutritional yeast in a vegetarian situation. So that wouldn't be the person that I would recommend. And I would recommend those vegetarians and vegans to look at your blood work. How are your nutrients? And are you depleted? Because so many, as you mentioned, vegans and vegetarians are depleted of nutrients and they don't absorb. So it's not my favorite type of diet type. Now, there are some people it works for. I worked with somebody who culturally was born into a vegan home. That's what they do. She's been vegan her whole life. She is now, I think, on her 3rd autoimmune disease. I've tried to get her to try a little fish. She just can't do it. And I totally respect that. But she lives on beans and she complains about her health. She complains about her weight a lot. And so I understand she's got this real struggle. She was born into that. Her whole family is vegetarian. So it's a major dilemma for some people like that. But I urge people who are not being vegan or vegetarian for any other reason except for, I think it's better, or because it's cruelty to animals or things like that. I understand everybody has their philosophies, and I respect that. But look at the science, look at your numbers, see if this is working for you.
Yeah, I think that's the issue is if you're doing, regardless of the diet you're doing, if you're optimally healthy, it's probably working for you.
Exactly.
If you're not optimally healthy, doesn't matter what the diet is, you have to say, okay, I've been feeding my body this for an extended period of time. I got 1 trillion organisms in my gut, and I am probably need a break from what I'm doing currently so I can change what's going on. And I think that's where people get kind of hung up. Like, this is a healthy diet. Yeah, it is. But you're at this point in time, you eat the same things for dinner, same, each week, the same 7 things for lunch, same 7 things for breakfast. It's the same food. Yes, you're eating healthy food, but there's very little variety in what you're eating. And what builds a more diverse gut biome is a more diverse diet. And we all get in the tendency, right? It's Monday night is this, Tuesday night is this, Wednesday night is this. Every morning I have my coffee and my whatever. And lunch, every day for lunch, I have the same thing because it's easy and that's what I'm comfortable with. But that means you've narrowed your food choices down to probably under, 50 to 60 foods, right?
Yeah.
Versus eating a wider variety. So I think for most people, if you're not healthy, okay, and that we're going to have a whole nother discussion about what that means, because I think we don't have a good definition of that either. But if you're not healthy, you just got to take a step back and say, I need to change something. And one of the easiest things to change, it's easy, it's simple, not always easy, is to change your diet a little bit, right? And just say, okay, I'm not going to do that. And people, you could probably attest to this too, really give you pushback when you say, hey, I need you to give up some eggs. What? I am not giving or give up dairy. I'm not giving up. Listen, I'm not asking you to divorce your spouse. I'm just asking you to stop eating that food for a couple of weeks, right?
I got to interject with a great story here. This is just great for all your listeners. I started working with this woman about, 6 weeks ago. She came in to see me. I had helped her daughter. She had rheumatoid arthritis, no longer. So she brings in her mother, and she's loveliest woman ever. And she's 75 years old, and she drinks an 8 to 10 ounce glass of milk, cow's milk, 3 times a day, every day for 75 years. She has head to toe body pain. She has to get one of those scooters in the market because she cannot walk. She cannot walk from the car she's not overly heavy, but she's just in full body pain. She cannot walk. So I said, hey, I didn't even detox her because she was in so much pain. I said, let's just take out the milk. That's the only change we're going to make today. And she looked at me like you just said, like, my milk, but I have it every day. I have it 3 times a day since I'm born.
It's good for my bones. Can't you see? Right. That's why I'm up and moving, right?
She took about 55 supplements, right? I was, why are you taking so many supplements? So we take out the dairy, the glass of milk, that's it. She comes in 10 days later. I have no body pain, none, it's gone. So you get what you get when you do what you do. And to your point, yeah, I'm not asking you to divorce your spouse, but if you make a change and it gives you what you want, isn't it worth trying? Now, it doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes it doesn't work. And then we have to go a little deeper and a little deeper. But a lot of times we can hit it right off the bat, right?
Yeah. Usually, and that's the thing. Sometimes it's just a simple strategy is just looking at what you do consistently on a day in, day out basis and say, hey, I got to make some changes to what these things are. If everything you did was perfect, you probably wouldn't have a health issue, but you have to start to look at those changes. I mean, even for me, when I was in my 40s, I was training for triathlons and, putting a lot of time and effort in, and I get my blood work done one day and I go like, I got thyroid antibodies and insulin resistance. And I'm like, whoa, wait a second. I'm doing the right stuff. How can this be happening to me all of a sudden? But I had to be honest with myself, take a step back and say, hey, I was really only sleeping 4 hours a night because I was staying up late to read and study and do stuff. Then you get up early to train, to fit all the training in, plus go to work, plus coach your kids' sports, plus, doing the stuff you do, plus running a couple business, then training. And then, so you do that for a number of years. And guess what? Your body says, hey, enough already. I'm shutting this party down. And now all of a sudden my metabolism is shutting down because it's saying, hey, we have a chronic inflammatory state going on here because you're overtraining, under recovering. And that was at the root of my issues. So I think for the person listening, like, I'm looking for the magic supplement. Stop looking for the magic supplement. Look at what you're doing on a daily basis. And as it comes to supplements, if you're taking 30 supplements and you're looking for the next one to take, you probably need to start by getting rid of the ones you're taking, right? Because there's no reason anybody, if you need 30 supplements to feel lousy, you probably don't need any of them, right? So that's, it's probably one of the first places I start is saying, okay, we're going to spend the next 30 days cleaning up your diet and getting you off all the supplements you're on. And people freak out at times, like, how am I going to live without this supplement? Do you feel great? No. Okay. Well, then it's pretty easy. Just get rid of it, right? But I might feel worse. You might, but it's really not fixing the issue. It may be band-aiding your brain, thinking that you're getting some benefit from it, but it's probably not doing what you read in the blog post that it's supposed to do.
Right? Coffee is like, and I take people off coffee and they're like, I've never not had coffee before. Mm-hmm. So, and then they come in at like a week or two later and they go, I have more energy without coffee. I can't even believe it. Yeah, it happens.
So it's the stuff we do. But let's talk a little bit now. We talked about some of the dietary stuff, a little bit difference in diets, but I want to get, because I don't want to run out of time. You wrote a book. And I want people to kind of get a chance to check this out. It's called FOODFRAME. Diet is a 4-letter word. So talk to us about the name FOODFRAME. What does that really mean? And talk about diet as a 4-letter word. And then we'll get into what they can learn about the book.
So FOODFRAME is my methodology, right? So that's what I realized after working with people for decades, that one diet type does not fit all. So what is your FOODFRAME is my question. So there is a quiz on my website that you can take, and it's only 12 questions, and you find out what your FOODFRAME is. And that's how you should be eating according to that FOODFRAME. So that's my methodology I use in my office with the people that I work with. I have a little bit more concrete information because I've got blood tests and stool tests to find out what your health status is. And I really fully believe that people will thrive when they're eating according to what their body needs. So that's where I created FOODFRAME. And in the book, I start off with my detox, and I talk about the benefits of detoxing and how we get toxins and so on and so forth. And we all have the ability to detoxify our own bodies. Our homocysteine will be a marker for that. But if we have MTHFR, our homocysteine tends to elevate, and that causes all kinds of other problems, which I won't get into. But it is, you always have to make sure you're taking out the trash. Once we do that, then there's 6 major diet types that I recommend, that I usually work with people in my office, depending on what your health status is. So as you've mentioned, pretty much all of them, keto, paleo, vegetarian or vegan, AIP, low lectin. Mm-hmm. And so those are basically, I think, the core 6 diet types that we should be eating, right? Some of them are long-term lifestyles, like you and I eat very similarly, very paleo. And some people need to be on AIP or low FODMAP for 30 to 90 days. And then I make recommendations on where to go from there. Low lectin is great. Also, another option for AIP people after they get off of AIP, I would recommend either low lectin or paleo. So I just think that those are that's the menu of diets, or eating lifestyles is what I say, that we should be eating, right? And I'm all about eating more for survival than for sport. You talked about that a little bit. I'm a little bit more like maybe 90, 95, 10, or 90, 90, 10, 95, 5. But, we all want to have some sport eating, right? We're going to go to Italy. I'm going to tell you, if you don't have a gluten issue, have fun. We'll clean you up when you get back, but have a good time, right? Don't go crazy, but enjoy. We have a lot of cultural things through food. We show love through food. We get celebrated. We do some bad things too. We punish kids with food. And if you don't do this, you can't have that ice cream, or, so we should really have a better relationship with food and use it as nourishment, right? That's how we nourish ourselves. It's not for what do I feel like, what sounds good, what am I in the mood for, right? I mean, you probably eat like me. Well, I had a lot of fiber and B vitamins for breakfast, so I'm going to have a little bit more, whatever nutrients I'm evaluating, right? I've got to need some more carbs or some, more whatever nutrients I need. So I'm evaluating it that way. But we should eat real food from the farm, as you said, pretty much across the board, because that's what we're putting leather, rubber, and canvas into our sneaker factory.
Yeah. So, and for people, I think sometimes they're like, well, we the soil's not mineral dense, so I'm eating this processed food. Listen, that processed food that they put all this extra cheap ingredients in to make it look fancy, like you got all those extra things, it's probably not better options. So the best thing to do is eat whole food, try and get as organic, grow a garden in your backyard, don't use a lot of toxic stuff in it. You're probably going to be better off. But yeah, so we've got this food frame. Find the kind of this frame of where you kind of feel well in, or that you do better in from a food perspective. You don't like the word diet, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it has a bad connotation. Really, the definition of diet is what you eat daily. But diet has now been associated with deprivation and starvation and a punishment, sort of, right? A corrective behavior. And, I don't like that connotation. Food, it feeds us, right? We don't have this relationship with brushing our teeth. Oh my God, I hope I have enough toothpaste at home when we're driving home. I hope I have enough, can't wait to brush. We don't have those. We just do it. We don't look forward to brushing our teeth, most of us, right? But we just do it because we know it's good for us, right? But we have this really crazy relationship with food, whether we were born with it. I mean, I hear stories all the time. I worked with one person years ago who told me about the dinner devil that they had growing up, and that the dinner devil would come if you didn't eat your food. I mean, you think about the psychology behind that. After, I'm sure their parents didn't mean to screw the kids up, but I mean, how do you have this relation? You're going to finish everything on your plate no matter what. So we don't have a good relationship with food. I don't think kids in this generation even know where food comes from, right? So I always urge people to take them to the farm in any local farm you have in the fall, and let them pick some pumpkins and some green beans and some strawberries or whatever it is that they're growing at that farm. So they understand. Have those kids come home, wash it, and help you cook it. Sit on the counter while you're chopping it. And once they are invested in their food, they have a good relationship with it. They realize where it comes from, and they realize what it does for them. They don't get that when you get the Pop-Tarts at the market. It's a very different thing. And it doesn't make them feel good. It doesn't. I worry about this generation, and the fact that our statistic is that 1 out of 3 children born today will be type 2 diabetic.
Yeah.
It's insanity to me.
Yeah. And so if they're going to be diabetic, that means they have chronic inflammation. If they have chronic inflammation, that means they're going to have some form of abnormal thyroid or adaptive thyroid signaling. So they're going to have weight issues. They're going to have chronic inflammatory issues. Just becomes this web of dysfunction that develops because
we're paying for their insurance. We pay for their insurance. Insurance should be structured according to how healthy you are, right? Not according to how much money you make, but how healthy you are, right?
Yes. So this is super controversial, and I've gotten quipped at for this, but I think one of the things that we need to do is definitely have a better definition of what health actually is. Because if you ask people, you'll get these kind of stupid canned, it's the absence of disease. No, it's not. And everybody assumes that they're healthy, right? Unless even if people that are on cholesterol medications and blood pressure medications and thyroid medication and whatever say, I'm healthy, but aren't you taking a bunch of meds? Yeah, but my doctor said I'm healthy. Well, then you're not healthy, because are you saying that you're in a bit higher state of health than the person who doesn't need any of those medications? No, yeah, probably not. They may be, but probably not, right? So what does that mean? And the other thing is, we have a problem when you don't directly pay for a service. Like what we've trained people to do is let a third party pay for us and take the decision making out of our hands. We lose the idea of what it really costs to be healthy and what it really costs to be sick. And so my idea is the same, is I think you need to put everybody at the forefront. Whether you have insurance or you don't have insurance, you pay the provider, you pay for the appointment first. And there are reasons that people may struggle with illnesses. And I heard a person say, well, why should it be? I may have some issues that make me sick. It's not my fault. Why should I have to pay higher insurance? And I understand part of that, especially if they grew up in an environment where somebody didn't have good control. So that part I understand. But I do think we can have everybody pay up front. And I think if they pay up front, they're less likely to say, listen, I'm going to pay $200 every time, or $400 for this appointment each time I go, and not get anything but a prescription. And I have to pay for that prescription and everyone they give me. And after a while, you're walking out after an appointment and it really does cost you $1,200 for that appointment. You're going to say, well, I can't do this every month. What do you mean? I'm taking 6 prescriptions. Yeah. And each prescription is really worth $300. So you have to pay for your $400 appointment, right? Then you need your $1,200 prescription. At some point, they're not going to be able to do that. And that people will make decisions and say, I got to change something. Just like we're going to see with the gas issues the way they are, we're going to hit a point where it really hurts the pocketbook. And somebody say, I'm not going on that trip. I'm not driving there because it just is not feasible. I think we have to go back and do that with health insurance and say, I'm in control. And then you can say, well, because you hear this too, why are you continuing to see that person if you don't think they're giving you benefit? Well, because my insurance pays for that. Okay, well, would you pay for their service out of pocket? Well, no. Well, then why are you paying for it? You're still paying for it. You're just paying for it in a monthly payment to somebody else. We've separated that payment thing. So why would you continue to see that person? Well, because my insurance covers it. Well, that's nonsense. What you and I do is cash-based service, right? So I'm paying you. If it's not valuable, they're not going to pay. And I'm okay with that, right? And I'm sure you're okay. Listen, if I'm not helping you, do not pay me, right? But I see that too. When people come to see me, they're like, wow, I have to pay out of pocket. Yep, you pay for everything out of pocket. You just don't see it at the beginning. Well, yeah, but it's a $30 visit to my doctor. My endocrinologist is only like $30. Okay, but are you doing better? No, I'm terrible. Okay. Well, then you're paying $30 each time you go in, plus what you're paying for insurance, and your insurance is going up because you're not getting better, and that's the game. And so you can keep doing that. You think it's only a $30 cost, but it's robbing you of your health and your quality of life, and you have more diseases and you're taking more meds. So I don't know, if I can help you and you don't need the meds and you don't need all those sick care visits, and your insurance maybe doesn't have to go up, maybe paying for a service that has value might be more important and less expensive, right?
Right. Exactly. You nailed it.
So
it's a broken system.
It is a broken system. And I don't know how, the only thing I can think of is to go back and say, hey, we're going to start transitioning people to self-pay.
Yeah.
Right? And then you submit to your insurance companies. But at the end of the day, everybody thinks a lot of people think the insurance companies are their friend. The
whole model is to say no to your customers. You bring them on, you onboard them according to where they live, what their zip code is, and then you say no. That's what their model is. The more you say no to your customers, the more margin you get.
Well, to a point, right? Because the Health Affordability Act that they passed, and Congress passed this thing with the intent that it would control the amount of money that the insurance company made on what you pay, right? And they said, hey, you got to pay out 80%. I think the number is something like 80%. You can only keep 20% of that premium for profit and for expenses, right? It's 20%. Well, it sounded like it would make sense, right? You would think that, okay, they can only make 20% now, so that'll cap costs. And so they're not going to pay for a lot. No. If I'm the insurance company and I only charge you a premium of $100, I can only make $20. So for me to be able to raise the premium, I got to be willing to pay for a bit more. So I'm going to pay for a little bit more. That justifies charging you more next year for insurance. And now I can charge you 200, and now I can make 20%. And now I got $40. And if I keep allowing just a little bit more charge, right, then I can collect more. So the game is we keep people, and this isn't technically what somebody's, I don't know, maybe somebody is, but if we can keep people sick, keep needing care, keep buying medication, then the cost goes up and we can make more money. And that's the only way we can make more money, is to keep more people sick and buying more prescriptions.
Absolutely.
Right? So it's a terrible model.
Oh, it's not for them, but for everybody else. Yeah. My dad volunteers at a hospital near his home. And I said, what do you do? You know, he deals with all these patients who in the infusion department. And so they're all coming in for chemo. And I said, well, what do you give them? And he said, well, we provide lunch for them. I said, oh, what do you serve? Well, we give them sandwiches and chips. You know, I said, what kind of chips? You know, potato chips and Cheetos and Doritos. And then they get a brownie or a cookie and a soda. I go, oh, well, that's good for a business. They'll keep coming back.
Yeah, the hospital, when I worked in the hospital, to see what was fed to ill people, it was incredible what we're doing. We've got sick, ill people, and we're feeding them some of the worst food we could possibly feed somebody who's sick. It's craziness. Now, look, we're an hour and a half into this. We could go another an hour and a half, 2 hours, but I want to be respectful of time. So let's talk about the book a little bit, and then we'll leave on a couple like tips for the general person. But so the book, tell them where to find the book and kind of the general outlay of the book, what they're going to learn in the book.
Yeah. So FOODFRAME is available on Amazon, on my website at risagrouxnutrition.com. It's available at Target and Barnes and Noble. The book has a couple of testimonials throughout of each diet type for people who it has helped. And it talks about detoxing, it talks about blood work, it talks a lot about thyroid, what markers to look at. It talks about blood sugar dysregulation, how much fiber do we need, how much protein do we need, a lot of information. It's really dense with information of really what you need to get started. And then it breaks down those 6 different diet types. So, and then each diet type has about 7 recipes with pictures, very easy. I work a lot, so I don't spend too much time in the kitchen, but I do cook a lot because I want to eat real food and I don't want to eat bad food. I'm really like, life is too short to eat bad food. I love the food I make, and people love it, the food. So it's really easy, approachable, even if you don't cook. Awesome. Yeah. And people can find me on my website at Risa Groux Nutrition, RISAGROUX nutrition.com. And I'm on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and all that stuff too.
Awesome. So we'll finish up with like 4, I think nature of everything is supposed to be odd numbers. So let's finish up with like 3 easy tips for the person who's maybe struggling with some health issues. What would you give? 3 tips, could be nutrition related, could be totally different, but give me 3 tips for the person listening who's kind of struggling with some health issues and they want to get started doing something.
3. Okay. Number 1, read labels. Look at what is going into your body. Just read it. If there's dyes, if there's chemicals, if there's bad oils like cottonseed oil or safflower oil or soybean oil or vegetable oil, do not eat it. Those are highly inflammatory oils. So look at your labels and be picky about what is going into your body. Second thing I would say is take out sugar. Sugar is the devil. It really is. We don't really glean any nutrition from sugar. It depletes our immune system. It depletes everything. It just causes inflammation. So take out sugar. And the third thing, this is tough because I could give like 17 different tips, but I would say take out the chemicals. Take out chemicals. Stop putting cell phone parts in your sneaker factory. And eat real food. Just eat real food like your great-grandparents ate. Animal protein, vegetables, sweet potato, yams, good fats, nuts, seeds, eggs, and avocado, olives, olive tapenade. Just eat, go into the refrigerator instead of the pantry. There's no real good food in the pantry. It's all dead. So eat foods that will that will spoil in 4 days. That's what we should be eating, right? Foods without labels.
Right. Good. We'll take those. And I did notice you snuck a fourth in on me. I did notice that. So, but I'll let you go for this time. So I appreciate you coming on the podcast. We could have gone another. I didn't even realize we were an hour and a half into it. I could go longer, but we both have things to do. So I appreciate you coming on. I'll put some links to the website and your social stuff in with the podcast stuff. I'll let you know when it comes out. For anybody who's listening, if you have questions, go to her site. She's got it's a really nice site to look at, real easy and fresh to look at. It doesn't look like it's too much stuff all in there. So it's easy to look at. The quiz is on there. You can do the FOODFRAME quiz to kind of see what frame you should be in. And she's got a lot of good resources there.
I just released a course about achieving optimal thyroid health. So that's on there, and I'm super proud of that course. I put everything I had into that, and you really know what to do for your thyroid from that course.
Awesome. All right. I'm going to let you go. Everybody, thanks for listening. Share this one with your friends and family, because this one's not necessarily, well, none of the podcasts I do are all about thyroid physiology. They're all about just general health and well-being. So until next time, take care, everybody.